In El Salvador, a judge requested the General Prosecutor's Office to initiate an investigation of President Bukele and Defense Minister Merino regarding the massacre of the El Mozote case. On Monday, U.S. Attorney General William Barr authorized federal prosecutors nationwide to investigate allegations of voting irregularities before the 2020 presidential elections is officially certified. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohamed mourned the loss of Saeb Erekat, the Palestinian veteran negotiator and politician who shepherded relations with world powers for decades. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada from the TeleSUR headquarters in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In El Salvador, Judge Jorge Guzman of the San Francisco Gotera Investigate Court asked Sunday the General Prosecutor's Office to initiate an investigation of President Bukele and Defense Minister Merino regarding the massacre of El Mozote case. As the amnesty law was repealed in 2016, the struggle to reopen the investigation of the military massacre in December 1981 in El Mozote and surrounding trails began. According to the judge, the armed forces of El Salvador, backed by Bukele and Merino, obstructed a series of programmed inspections of the archives of different military units, alleging that the required documentation was destroyed in the last 40 years. Human rights organizations denounced the incident and questioned the current government's true commitment to the victims of the armed conflict.
The Public Prosecutor's Office of the Republic is now required to launch a criminal investigation against President Nayib Bukele, his defense minister Francisco Merino, and the officials who impeded the inspection of military archives in the El Mozote case, because it is evident to us that the private prosecutors committed crimes such as arbitrary acts, failure to comply with their duties, disobedience, and cover-ups.
The Attorney General's Office of El Salvador searched Monday the Ministry of Health and Finance, looking for documents related to the purchase of health supplies in an irregular manner during the COVID-19 pandemic. German Arriaza, director of the Anti-Corruption Unit of the Public Prosecutor Office, stated that authorities have so far carried out 20 raids. Among the complaints are the purchase of non-certified masks at 65% overpriced and the payment of $1.3 million for 1 million of these items manufactured in Guatemala. Francisco Laví, Salvador's health minister, was also accused of authorizing the purchase of rubber boots for $225,000 from a company owned by a family member. And finally, the delivery of $300 to 100,000 people without detailing the criteria for selecting the beneficiaries of this aid. Colombian Senator Iván Cepeda denounced the direct involvement of Colombia's government in the campaign in favor of Donald Trump. The congressman pointed out the role of Ambassador Francisco Santos in vote-raising activities of an independent country.
Regular meetings in which congressmen from the Democratic Center attend, in which the group Latino of Trump is promoted, and in this opportunity on July 20th, Ambassador Francisco Santos participated, making some allusions to the partisan politics and ended up greeting Mr. Diaz-Balart. An ambassador taking part, I don't know what Dr. Diaz-Lujan thinks about this, in the middle of an electoral process, the ambassador taking part in a group that clearly made vote-gathering activities in favor of another country. So the first reaction of Ambassador Francisco Santos when we told him that he had met with groups that were working on the campaign, he went from denial to trying to conceal the reality, that he had been there, but that he had only made reference to the relationship between Colombia and the United States.
Perus Congress decided to remove President Martin Vizcarra from office because of a new corruption scandal. The motion against Vizcarra is based on alleged bribes that he received when he was a regional governor. The South American nation has been thrust into yet another chapter of political uncertainty, while also grappling with a severe economic downturn and the world's highest per capita COVID-19 mortality rate. The new call for Vizcarra's removal centers around accusations that he took over $630,000 in bribes in exchange for authorizing 2 construction contracts while being governor of Moquegua. Vizcarra pointed out that he will not have had the authority to usher through the contracts in questions, which must go through a detailed approval process involving multiple actors. One of the contracts was set for an irrigation project and the other for a region-wide hospital. And Peruvian Congress leader Manuel Merino arrived for his swearing-in ceremony as he prepares to take over the presidential functions until the end of the current term in July 2021, following the impeachment of Martin Vizcarra. Merino will be sworn in at a special session of Congress, becoming Peru's third president since 2016. The Central Bank of the Dominican Republic, BCRD, announced it will inject $200 million into foreign exchange market in addition to its regular participation through its electronic foreign currency trading platform. According to the BCRD, this measure has the purpose of guaranteeing the timely availability of dollars to meet the demands of the productive sectors during the last month of the year, especially for those priority activities that produce or sell medical supplies, food, consumer goods, as well as for the acquisition of raw materials for the industry. It is essential to highlight that the central bank has a level of international reserves higher than $9,700 million, equivalent to approximately 13% of the gross domestic product, and coverage for 6 months of imports, exceeding the threshold of 10% of the GDP and the 3 months of imports recommended by the International Monetary Fund. The 10th High-Level Forum of the Korea-Caribbean Partnership is ready to be held on Wednesday via online, South Korea's Foreign Ministry announced. This forum has been taking place annually since October 2011. This edition will deal with health, medical care, and food safety cooperation for a future no-COVID-19 pandemic stage, according to the Foreign Ministry. The statement adds that the Vice President Minister Choi Jong-kun will welcome from Seoul the 40 Caribbean participants whose representation will be headed by the CARICOM Secretary General Irwin LaRocque. CARICOM's Secretary General Rodolfo Sabonge will greet the attendees on behalf of this organization. The Foreign Ministry will restrict the number of South Korean participants in person to 40 in accordance with quarantine measures. And we'll go now to a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back from the South. On Monday, U.S. Attorney General William Barr authorized federal prosecutors nationwide to investigate allegations of voting irregularities before the 2020 presidential elections is officially certified. The measure comes days after the mainstream U.S. media announced the victory Democrat Joe Biden over President Donald Trump after the vote count was completed. This opens the possibility that the current president will use this to try to challenge the election result. The AG's decision has already led to resignations of some members of his staff, such as the head of the Electoral Fraud Division, Richard Pilger. The Attorney General distanced himself from Trump's conspiracy theories, stressing that the investigations will be carried out if there are any substantial evidence. China condemned the U.S. for blatantly meddling in Hong Kong affairs, calling for Washington to reverse its decision of imposing sanctions on 4 Chinese officials.
Relevant measures from the U.S. is blatantly meddling in Hong Kong affairs, grossly interfering in China's internal affairs, and is seriously violating international law and basic norms governing international relations. China firmly opposes this and strongly condemns it. Hong Kong belongs to China. Hong Kong affairs are China's internal affairs, and no external force has the right to interfere. China urges the US to immediately stop interfering in Hong Kong affairs, to immediately lift these so-called sanctions, and to not go further and further down the wrong path.
China also accused Canada for the arbitrary detention of Meng Wanzhou.
China has repeatedly expounded its position on the individual cases involving these Canadian citizens. It must be pointed out that the coercive diplomacy label cannot be put on China. More and more facts show that the law enforcement authorities in the US and in Canada are suspected of abusing procedures and illegally interrogating Meng Wanzhou. Canada also refused to disclose key evidence of the case to the public, which fully exposed the political nature of the Meng Wanzhou case. What the Canadian side is doing in the Meng Wanzhou case is actually arbitrary detention. We once again urge Canada to face up the root causes of the problem, which cannot be solved by concealing facts and misleading the public.
On Tuesday, the European Union formally accused US giant Amazon of abusing its control over an online marketplace to distort competition, a breach of antitrust rules. Competition Commissioner Margrethe Vestager said Brussels informed the company of its view and will push on with an investigation while opening a second formal probe. The second investigation will probe whether Amazon's Prime service and the buy box that appears on the screen artificially push buyers into sellers using Amazon's logistics service.
Today, the Commission has sent a statement of objection to Amazon with the preliminary conclusions that Amazon illegally distorted competition in online retail markets.
The European Commission Vice President added that Amazon illegally abused its dominant position in the French and German online marketplaces.
To this preliminary conclusion that Amazon illegally abused its dominant position as a marketplace service provider in Germany and France, and Amazon is at the center of this market development. More than 70% of consumers in France and more than 80% of consumers in Germany that made online purchases, well, they bought something from Amazon in the last 12 months.
The European Union confirmed that it will impose tariff on US goods and services worth $4 billion due to the lack of progress to settle the dispute on subsidies to aircraft markets. We have made it clear that we want to solve these long-standing problems since 2006. Unfortunately, despite our efforts due to the lack of progress from the United States, we can say that the EU will exercise its right and will impose countermeasures, EU Trade Chief Valdis Dombrovskis noted. In that context, in the World Trade Organization, WTO, ruled in 2019 that the EU did not follow the best trade rules by assisting Airbus, a decision that led us authorities to impose tariff worth more than $7 billion on products and goods imported from Europe. Spain's government claimed the future democratic memory law to dignify the victims of the civil war and the subsequent dictatorship of Francisco Franco. The first vice president of the Spanish government, Carmen Calvo, championed the proposed law against the attacks by the extreme right she described as coarse, forgetful and radicalized. Carmen Calvo visited the archive and library of Pablo Iglesias Foundation, founder of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party in Alcalá de Henares, Madrid. The right does not like memory, it has never liked it. The far right does not like it at all, probably because it has to face a dishonorable memory, Carmen Calvo said, thus referring to the right-wing Popular Party and the far-right Vox. On September 15, the Spanish coalition government, supported by PSE and the Unidas Podemos Lefty Alliance, passed the draft of the Democratic Memory Law. Tokyo Olympics organizers said news of coronavirus vaccines was a relief on Tuesday, but insisted their biosecurity planning for their postponed games remained unchanged. Olympic officials have regularly said that coronavirus vaccines is not a precondition for staging the games, now scheduled to open a year late in July 2021.
The organizing committee is not disconnected from society. We are fully working within it, and in that sense we are feeling the same as you probably felt, positive sentiment and relief. Ultimately, the Olympics and Paralympics are an accumulation of competitions day by day in each venue, so the fact that we have recently managed to organize a gymnastics competition in a safe manner in a still uncertain context amid the coronavirus sends a strong message.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohamed mourned the loss of Saeb Erekat, who died at the age of 65 from COVID-19 complications after weeks of hospitalization. Erekat was a Palestinian veteran negotiator and politician who shepherded relations with world powers for decades.
The departure of the friend and courageous brother Dr Saeb Erekat represents a great loss to Palestine and to our people. We feel deeply saddened by his loss, especially in light of these difficult circumstances facing our Palestinian cause. Our people will remember the great late Dr. Saeb Erekat, the righteous son of Palestine who stood at the forefront defending the causes of his homeland and its people in the fields of work and the national struggle and in the international arena.
Azerbaijans President Ilham Aliyev said Tuesday that the occupation of Azerbaijani lands had come to an end as Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed on a deal with Russia to end weeks of fierce clashes over Nagorno-Karabakh.
I signed this document with happy and proud feelings and want to congratulate all the people of Azerbaijan with this historical event. Today we put an end to the process of settling a long-term conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we end the occupation of Azerbaijani lands.
Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says there are criminal groups among the hundreds of people storming into parliament. Chaotic scenes erupted inside Armenia's parliament in the early hours of Tuesday as protesters angry at the ceasefire deal with Azerbaijan seized control of its chambers to denounce the country's leadership. Many gathered inside its inner chamber, taking the seat of parliamentarians and shouting "resign" or "out." Arguments and scuffles broke out as protesters tried to take to the podium to speak. Prime Minister Pashinyan called on protesters to go home, saying at this difficult time we must stand shoulder to shoulder. People in Baku celebrated after Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed on a deal with Russia to end weeks of fierce clashes over Nagorno-Karabakh. The fighting had raised fears of a wider regional war, with Turkey supporting its ally Azerbaijan while Russia had a defense pact with Armenia and a military base in the Armenian territory. 3 ceasefires failed in the past 6 weeks to bring an end to the conflict, where thousands of human lives have been lost. Russian peacekeepers are being deployed along front lines to secure a corridor connecting Nagorno-Karabakh with Armenian territory. The Russian Defense Ministry said nearly 2,000 peacekeepers will be deployed with 90 armored vehicles in Nagorno-Karabakh, adding that several Il-76 aircraft carrying the first peacekeepers and their equipment have been taken off from an airfield in Russia. Nagorno-Karabakh's leader Ayarik Harutayan explained his decision after Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed to a Russian-brokered peace deal to end weeks of heavy fighting and find a long-term solution to the dispute over the region.
I do not know how history will assess yesterday's decision, but we had to make that decision. If the fighting continued at such a pace, we would have lost all of Artsakh and would have had many more casualties. And I want to ask my dear compatriots to sober up. Civil war, intolerance, is a great threat for our country, not only for the peace of Artsakh, but also for the peace of Armenia. So let's come together and assess this before making any decisions.
Jordanians voted Tuesday in a parliamentary election overshadowed by the coronavirus pandemic, which has dealt a heavy blow to the Arab country's already debt-ridden economy. More than 50,000 security force personnel were on hand to ensure masks were worn inside polling stations and social distancing maintained. Authorities ruled that the four-yearly election should go ahead, but voters who have tested positive for the novel coronavirus face up to a year in prison if they ignore instructions to stay home. As of the eve of the polling day, the kingdom had confirmed around 150,000 infections and 1,295 deaths.
My demands are many: unemployment, the youth, the overall financial situation of the people, orphans, widows, unemployed youth. All these need solutions. This voting is a national duty that the government calls for, and we support that and feel pride in voting and fulfilling our electoral role.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, you can join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.